Hello everybody, my name is Ethan. Welcome back to the channel where today we are going to be beginning our final chapter in our Intro to C# class. As you can see, we have finished everything besides this last one. It says it's going to take about 2 hours. In my experience, that's going to be 2 videos. So, I could be wrong, but this might be the second to last video. We'll have to see by the end of today's episode, but we'll jump right into it with lists. In the previous episode, we learned about references, objects, and strings, a little bit more about strings. So if you missed that, be sure to go leave that one a view in a comment and stuff. All right, let's start with lists. At this point, we'll assume you're familiar with arrays. They're a useful tool for managing large amounts of sequential data, but arrays have their drawbacks. They have limited length. You have to keep track of the number of elements in the array using a separate index. You can only edit one element at a time. Lists resolve all these issues. Like arrays, they are a sequential collection of values and hold references to any type. Unlike arrays, they have effectively unlimited length. They automatically track the number of actual elements in the list and have handy methods to work with multiple elements at a time. In this lesson, we'll cover list basics and some common list methods. This code creates and edits a list of cities. How many different ways, or how do these look different from arrays? Run the code to see it in action. So let's run the code. So first, it looks like we're going to use this list keyword, and then we're going to use something we haven't used before, and that is the kind of the less than, greater than sign. In this context, I should say, we have used them before to denote if a value is greater than or less than. But it looks like we have a list. A new list containing the cities of Delhi, Los Angeles, and St. Petersburg. Then we have something called citieslist.add. We added New York City, and then we removed Delhi. And then we added a range, which apparently included this. And then bool has New Delhi. It checks to see if it contains New Delhi. And then for each city, or string city and cities list, we're going to write out city, and that's exactly what it did. Creating and adding. A list is a sequential data structure that can hold any type. Like arrays, you can use them to store any sequential information like letters of the alphabet, comments on a blog post, the finishing times for a horse race, or items on a restaurant menu. You can create a list using the new keyword like you would have created any other class. You can specify the type of a element inside angle brackets. In this example, the list cities list, and it holds the instance of type string. So list, the angle brackets, the name of the list, and then the new list with the angle brackets again. You can add elements to the list using the add method, citieslist.add, and we added Delhi. You can access elements using indices and square brackets. You can also reassign elements using bracket notation. In order to use lists, you'll need to add this to the top of your file. We'll explain later in detail. So you'll have to use using system.collections.generic. Create a list to hold the top women's marathon times in minutes. Create an empty list of type double and store it in the variable marathons. So we'll do that by saying list. We'll use those angle brackets with type double. And then we'll call it marathons, and we'll set it equal to new list of type double, and see if that ends up working out nicely for us. Jemima Sumgang won the 2016 marathon in Rio de Janeiro with a time of 144.07 minutes, and Tiki Jalana won the 2012 marathon in London with a time of 143 minutes. That's just 2 hours, 2 hours and 23 minutes and 7 seconds. Use the add statement to add those values to the list. So we will now add the values of the list by saying marathons.add, and then we will put the time in the Rio de Janeiro one with 144.07, and then the other one was 143.12. I might actually have to do to marathons dot add 143.12. print the second value in the list to the console. So if we do a console.writeLine, if we remember though, marathons and all lists are most likely going to be 0 indexed. So to print the second item in the list, we'll put 1 into the brackets. Perfect. Object initialization. Our first way to create lists and add items took multiple lines, right? So we had our first line where we initialized the list, then the second the second and third where we added values to the list. We can now do this all in one string or one line using object initialization. Looks very similar to an array where we just add a line with squiggly brackets and add the values of the list into it. We won't cover everything about object initialization in this lesson, but you need to recognize and use it. Basic construction uses parentheses and no values. Object initialization uses curly braces and the actual values go in between. If we need to add elements to that second list later, we can still just use add. The current code creates an empty list and uses add to add elements, delete those lines, and make the same list with an object initialization. So first, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to kind of recreate what I want it to look like. But now instead of the parentheses, we're going to add in everything in just this one line. Now it may end up wrapping to a second line, but it's not technically a separate line of code. It's all just one line, .73, and then 146.333. Now everything is in one line. I'm going to get rid of this text and bring this up to the top. It says don't delete that code. Let's run it now and see what happens. I must have miscopied that one over. Perfect. Count and contains. We can check on the status of our list in two ways. We can find the number of elements in the list using the count property, list string, and then we use the list.count. We can check if an element has exists in the list using contains, and it will return a true or a false. The list marathons has been initialized for you right there. It's asking us print the count to the console. So if we do a console.writeLine to the marathons, oh my gosh, count, we can check how much or how many values are in it. It looks like there's 4 in the count. In the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games, Nako Takahashi won the marathon with the time of 1:43.23 minutes, the Olympic record in 2012 in London. Use add to add that value to the list. So we'll do that by doing marathons dot, come on now, add, and we'll add the value of 143.23. Perfect. To make sure that it was added to the list, let's use the contains method, marathons.contains, and we want to check for 143.23. And we'll wrap that around a console.writeLine. Print count again, make sure it increased to 5. So then we'll do the exact same thing down here. And now we should see 4, and then we print out yes or true, sorry, and then it should say 5, which is exactly what it says. Removing. To remove a specific item from a list, we can use the remove method. It expects the specific item as an argument and returns true if it was successfully removed. The code removes deli from the list and returns true. So we remove from deli. If the specific item does not exist in the list, the method call returns false. Since Dubai is not in the list, success will be false. If you remove an element in the middle of the list, all of the elements will be shifted down one in the index. In the first example, the list was originally. Now, after the call to remove deli, the list becomes. Okay, so the list marathons has already been initialized. Let's print out the second item in the list. Doing so by putting out wrapping a console.writeLine around marathons indexed at 1. Again, being 0 index, it would go 0, 1. So the second item would be 1. Remove that the item 143.12, which is currently the second item in the list, and restore it in a variable called bool named remove. So we'll say bool removed is equal to marathons dot remove with the item 143.12. We now have the answer true. It'll say yes, true, that it removed it. And then print the second element again and the value of removed. The second element should be different and remove should be true. So we're going to have two console.writelines here. The first one is going to just be the removed variable. And in the second one, we're going to have the new marathons at index 1. And that should work. True, and a new value at the second spot. Clearing. If we need to remove all the elements from a list, we could iterate through the entire list and call remove. The easier way is to use the clear method. If we use clear, the count immediately goes to 0. Marathons has a bunch of old values that we need to remove. Use clear to remove them all. To do that, we'll just do marathons.clear. And now the count should be 0 to the top here. Perfect. Assessing out of bounds. Effectively, we can add an infinite number of items to a list. We can add and edit them using bracket notation. However, this doesn't mean we can access any random index. If we try to access the 1001st element in a list, we'll get an error. The above code causes the error unhandled exception. System argument out of range exception. The index was out of range. We can only access indices what we've been added to the list. The last available index in numbers list would be 999. Here are 2 tips to avoid the issue. Imagine the list growing every time we add in a number and shrinking every time we remove a number. Unlike arrays, there is no set length. Check the count before you go. This code has 2 issues. Fix the erroneous statement by changing the index it uses. So it's using a negative index. If we just run the code, it is going to tell us where the list possibly is. Line 18 is what it says. Yeah, this, if we just get rid of the minus sign, perhaps that might end up helping us out. Line 19 now. So if we go to the list, there's 3 here. If we there should be 3 there, and then the future winner, I'm not sure what the future winner might be. We'll just do this and now we should be good. To reach this point, there are no errors. Working with ranges. So far we've added, accessed, and removed single elements in a list. What if we wanted to add, access, or remove multiple elements at once? In a world of lists, we can call a subsequence of elements a range. For example, this list has 5 elements. Sorry about that. I ended up getting a text. We can say that the range of elements is from index 1 to 3. Here are 4 common range related methods: add range, insert range, remove range, get range. So add range takes a array or list as an argument, adds the value to the end of the list, returns nothing. Insert range takes an int and an array or list as an argument, adds the value at the int index and returns nothing. Remove range takes 2 int values. The first int is the index at which to begin removing, and the second is the element or is the number of elements to remove, returns nothing. Get range takes two int values. The first int is the index at the first desired element, and the second int is the number of elements in the desired range, returns a list of the same type. Here is each one in action. So we start off with just a list that says first and second. Add range adds fifth and sixth. So then the list becomes first, second, fifth, sixth. In the insert range, we have third and fourth. And it looks like we put it at 2, and so it's going to insert it at the 2 spot, at the 2 index. Then we have remove 4 through 2, starting at 4 actually. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Starting at 4, it's going to remove 2 spots, 1 and 2. So it will remove 5th and 6th, and that's what we see happens. Then in get range, we go from 0 to 3, so it would return the 0 spot to the 3 spot, which would be first, second, third. Get range, use get range to get the first 3 elements in the marathons list. Store the result in a new variable called top marathons. So we want to use the get range function on marathons dot get range. Just want the first 3 variables, so we'll go 1 through 2. That's going to grab just the first 3, or actually no, 1 through 3. And then we'll store that in a variable called top marathons. That will be a double variable, a double Oh my gosh, I did it again. Okay, and I didn't put I was doing good there for a second, you guys. And I might still be messing up here. Cannot implicitly to double. Okay, so it would be list Okay, loop through top marathons and print each value to the console. So for each double marathon in top marathon. Oh my god, how does that keep happening? Console.write. I'm going too fast, you guys. Console.write line marathon. Perfect. Looping through lists. Like arrays, we can perform an operation for every element in a list using for and for each loops. With for loops, make sure to use count to stay within the bounds of the list, right? And with a for each loop, the counting is handled for you, which is super nice. Generally, we prefer for each loops because they require less typing and thus less chance for typos. If the index is used in the operation, like printing out each index and element together, then we'll use a for loop. The second for loop in the code is used to print out a bib for each runner. Replace it with a for each loop that achieves the same object. So we want to do the second for loop. So we have a for loop here. For each print out a bib for each, right? For each runner. In what list here? What's the list that we have? List looks like runners. For each string runner in runners, to upper int id equals ran next console id, right? See if that works. May have made a mistake somewhere, but nope. Looks like I actually did it nicely. Generic collections. You've done great so far with lists. It's time to take a look at the bigger picture. Remember the one line we mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, using system.collections.generic? The list class is a group of classes called generic collections. They don't exist in the default set of system settings, so we need to make a reference to them with this line. Generic collections are a data structure that are defined with a generic type. Each class is defined generally without a specific type in mind. When we make an actual instance, we define the specific type. Right? Imagine it is like a set of general instructions. In a toy store, we can tell the employees how to add or remove items from a shelf without specifying the type of toy. In the same way, we can use add and remove without knowing a list's data type. For this reason, the formal class list name of lists is list T. That T is the type parameter. It represents some type that we can specify later. The general instructions, however, are neatly contained in the generic list T class. Let's see why this is useful by imagining the other more difficult ways we could create generic collections. Use type-specific classes like string list, int list, etc. We would have to make the list class for every type, defining the same properties and methods for each list class. Use a list containing object class types. List objects using object means that we can't use any of the unique functionality for each type, and it takes a lot of computing power to convert references to and from the object type. As you continue coding, you'll see yourself how useful generic collections are. Add a reference to the, so we'll go up here and we'll say using system.collections.generic. Let's declare 3 empty lists with inside of main. One should hold bool types, one should hold random types, and one should hold iService provider types. So we'll do that by doing list bool list equal to new list bool. And we'll do this again now with random type. Random list is equal to new list of type random. Then there is going to be list of type iService provider. And we'll call this ISP list. New list iService provider. Interfaces work here too. Perfect. Review. Well done. You've learned a lot of useful information in this lesson. A list, or list T, is a generic blah, blah, blah. A lot of stuff you can read here. I'm not going to go over it. Let's look at the instructions, though. Add your city to the list, then use a for each loop to print the whole list. So we'll do that by doing cities list dot add, and we'll of course put new DMX monkey York, new DMX monkey York. I don't know, a little silly. And then we'll use a for each string city in cities list. We will console.writeLine each city. Nice. Okay, that is actually going to be it for this video. Another one of the quicker ones, but then after linq, Linux, let's see actually if I've been pronouncing it wrong for the entire time. Who knows? I have no idea, but we'll find out later. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.